So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about 8 different hardest things in Dan Pena'S QLA model. So I have been to Dan Pena'S 2 of programs that he has. One of them is called Quantum Leap Advantage, which happens at his castle. At the time when I did it, it was around 20,000 pounds. I think right now it's about $40,000. And I have also been to the hardcore seminar, the QLA hardcore seminar, which also happens at his castle. And when I did it, it was 20,000 pounds. Right now, I think that is also around $40,000. And I did this in 2019, December. So if you want to find me, you can find me online in one of his videos that he posts of each year's castle seminar. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the 8 hardest things about the model. And I happened to execute on the model. I did not just go to the seminar. I went and executed, various steps of the model. Each step by step, I executed over the last couple of years. And I'm going to be sharing some insights as to what I found personally the hardest thing for myself. These may not be the exact things that you may find difficult. These are just my personal things that I found. It's different for everybody, but I will be sharing them with you so that you're aware of it and you can work on it. And, just a little bit of an awareness in these aspects, a different perspective can help create the necessary power for you to take action. So let's get started. Number 1 was limiting beliefs. I did not know anybody who had bought businesses. By the way, if you're new to this, let me just explain something very, very quickly. The seminar is about creating wealth, creating generational wealth that takes 20-25 years to shorten that time frame and make that wealth a little bit sooner. So this business model is about buying businesses. So instead of creating a company from scratch, which most of the entrepreneurs try to do, this is about buying a company that's already established, buying something that somebody else built for the last 20-25 years. And you choose an industry where the owners, the average age of the owners is very high. So they are in their 60s, 70s, and they don't have a succession plan. So they don't have anybody they can sell their business to. These are small businesses. When I say small, I'm talking about $1 million to $5 million. So that size of a business, you could buy it at a very cheap price. So the whole QLA model is based on creating a big company through buying several of the small companies. Creating a medium-sized company, $50 to $100 million. That's typically where big exits happen. You could acquire these companies and create a portfolio of that size. So that's what the model is about. And so you find these companies and you acquire them. So when I went to the seminar, I had no idea that this is what the seminar was about. All I knew was that he had created wealth and I could see the wealth that he had created. And I knew that he hasn't created it recently. He had it for a long time. So, when he was 40 years old, he was already super rich. And he had been living in the castle since he was 40. So that was a very solid proof that, okay, he did not arrive at this position when he's 70, 75 years old. He arrived at this position when he was in his 40s. So that was a very strong evidence that, what he has to say is valid. So that's why I went to the seminar. I had no idea that this is about buying businesses. I wanted to learn a business model where I could create wealth, and that's why I went there. So I didn't even know or even heard about anybody in my whole environment who is into buying businesses. Maybe they have advised when 2 companies are merging. I would hear about mergers happening in, on Google, on the news, but I never knew anybody who was into buying businesses. I knew people who bought real estate. I knew people who invested in the stock market, but I had no concept about somebody buying a company. I didn't even think that that was a thing. So for me to hear about it, okay, you can just buy this thing, like with no money of your own, like using bank's money, that concept was completely foreign to me. The other concept that was foreign to me was that you could bring very high profile people, like CEOs of billion-dollar companies to be your business partners. I had no idea you could do that. So what I'm getting at is the first barrier, the first hard thing for me to do was to get over my own limiting beliefs. Like for 25, 26, 29 years, I have been conditioned by my environment, by the school, by the college, by my family, by relatives, into a certain way of life. You go to school, you go to college, you do an internship, get a job, work at a job, kiss your boss's ass, climb the corporate ladder, and then you'll have money for retirement. You get married to one girl, hopefully you stay with her. And that was the dream. And it was a really boring future from my standpoint. So suddenly there is a man who's talking about a completely different world. And then I also knew about the world of business, which is everything is uncertain in that world. And now somebody's talking something completely else, which is buying companies and bringing these high-profile individuals together, negotiating with top law firms. It was a completely different world, and I felt very small in that world when he was explaining these things. And I was thinking, how am I going to do these things? Maybe he was able to do it. He has a finance background. I did not even finish college. I have a marketing background. How is this going to work out? So I had to get over that. And he said it's not important that you need to have experience. You could just do it because you would have other people, your partners, who would have the experience. You would really do the execution. So you really needed the courage, you really needed the work ethic, the discipline, the focus. And if you were willing to make the calls, you could do it. The pathway was laid out and it's pretty straightforward. And that was another thing that was pretty hard for me to wrap my head around, is that this model is very simple. And I couldn't get over it. But doesn't mean it's easy, It's kind of like having a six-pack. How do you have a six-pack? You do 500 crunches every single day. Like, that's a simple advice, but it's not easy. Just like that, he said do 2,000 cold calls. That's a very simple advice, but it's very emotionally draining when you do it. So there was a limiting belief that how can something be so simple and yet so powerful? So, and every time I would make a call with an executive, I would have a call, and I did over 400 to 800 presentations in the last few years. I've met top bankers, high-profile CEOs, owners of multi-million-dollar businesses. And every time I would have to go to these meetings, I would get sick to my stomach because I've never done anything like it. And I would literally get inside my blanket because I would have these physical responses that I wasn't used to. It was almost like all my ancestors' insecurities were in me. All my ancestors who worked their whole life to keep the family together, and all of their fears and insecurities were kind of in my DNA. And I faced nothing but resistance. Everything in the model I had resistance towards. And that's when you're outside of your comfort zone. So outside of your comfort zone, you want to puke. And frankly, that's where I wanted to be, is outside my comfort zone, because I know that that's where the growth happens. So that was the number one hardest thing, was the limiting beliefs. And Dan Pena also referred to this as emotional bank account, where you feel emotionally drained, where everything in your psyche is pulling you down, is pulling you back, and you want to go in one direction, but everything, your whole programming is pulling you back and doesn't want you to execute on it. For example, when I got into the business partnership with a $3.5 billion company CEO, I did not think he would say yes. And I was like, don't even bother calling him. He's not going to say yes. And I called him 4 times. First time he did not pick up. Second time he did not pick up. Third time, fourth time, he finally picked up, and then we had a meeting. And I remember when I was at the hotel, I saw him and I was like, there's no way this guy is going to say yes. But he said yes. And everything changed in my life from that point on. So things that I did not think possible, because what does the conventional wisdom say? General wisdom in the public is, why would a $3.5 billion company CEO who's at the peak of his career going to partner up with somebody young who's just starting out? That's a very good question. But the answer is they do. One of my clients who I trained, he has got a very high senior executive in Coca-Cola who has done billion-dollar deals to be on his board recently. I know it's possible. And he's in his early 20s. So how does something like that happen? It's completely out of the normal way of things. You don't even hear about something like that. So that's something one of the first things to get over of is this is possible. And when you see evidence of this through other people, then you believe it. But when it happens for you, it is a completely different experience. There is a series of limiting beliefs that got just shattered. So many things that my family, my school had said, just shattered. I was like, holy shit, if I could do this, what else could I do? And then from that point on, it was an exploration. And every step I executed, I shattered limiting beliefs. So that's number one barrier you would face. One of the hardest things is the limiting beliefs. Second is getting rid of family and friends. One of the pillars of the Q&A model is building a strong foundation. And for most people, most of their day is around personal relationships, personal non-financial relationships. And non-financial relationships take up a lot of time for a lot of people. And if you have a financial goal in your life, a big financial goal, and all of your time is around personal relationship, friends, family, relatives, significant other. All of this time is just going to waste. So, and when you spend time with these people, you have prior obligations. These are long-term relationships. My relationship with my mother, that's not a new relationship. That's a long-term relationship, and it has a future also. So I have obligations that I have committed to that I would now have to break. I had obligations with my brother. I had obligations probably with my best friend, with my girlfriend. If you're married, you may have long-term obligations with your wife that you've already committed for the next 10, 20 years, that this is the pathway that you're going to be taking for the rest of your life. Now, suddenly to divulge from that, to change the direction and to renegotiate those terms, that's going to be a challenge, because they got on board with you for this journey, and now you are changing the path. You're changing the direction. But the important thing is that you have your life, you have your pathway, and they can either join you or not join you. That's their choice. So a lot of these relationships can break. And in my case, almost all of the relationships got broken. And what happens is when these relationships get broken because there is a fundamental disagreement in the direction we were going, then it can be very painful. And also, a lot of the times these relationships do not come back. So you may actually lose some important people that you currently hold important in your life to build this thing, to build this project, to build this company. And it's not in everybody's emotional strength to do that. And that's why you would be surprised to know that a lot of the people do not even execute the model. They don't actually go out and execute even the first step. Right in the seminar, They paid £20,000 and they decide they're not going to do it in the seminar. I know people like this. After a month, we had a follow-up call, and probably like 40 to 50% were like, decided they were not going to do it. This is in the first seminar. In the hardcore, there are a little more serious people who come. So I wouldn't say it was 50%, but in the first seminar, some of the people, we had a call with Dan Benya. Some of the people did not even show up to the call. They were so scared. And so a lot of the people just opt out of the model because it can be emotionally draining. And if you don't have the courage to spend time with yourself a lot, to live that kind of life where you're spending a lot of time with yourself, this is not for you. This is no joke. And it's not, if you can't do that, then it's not for you. So this is something that Dan Pena really, really hammered on, that, this is not for everybody. And I thought it's just a sales pitch or something, but it's not. He's really being literal about it. And that's another thing I realized when I came back home, that so many things he said that I thought that he's just saying it. He wasn't just saying it, he meant it. And that was a little bit scary. But when you get rid of these people, you have a lot of space in your life. You have a lot of time in your life. You have a lot of ability. All of a sudden, things that you have given up on, your goals and dreams that you've given up on, come back in your life. Maybe you wanted to be a public speaker, which is something I wanted to do. You wanted to do something big. You wanted to travel the world. I mean, your bandwidth gets freed up. Yes, you lose some things, but your bandwidth gets freed up. Your life gets freed up. You have time and energy suddenly to do what you want to do, to be aligned with your goals. And he had a weekly reporting system that we had to follow, whereby we had to list out our goals and list out who we met every single day. Friends, family, and what did these two have in common. And I quickly realized that where I was spending my time, it had nothing to do with my goals. I was completely spending time, giving time to things which are unrelated to my goals. And a lot of the people do that. You might want to look in that area in your life as well. The third is the lack of experience. This is the third hardest thing, is you are attempting something that you haven't done. So you don't have experience. You don't have a reference point as to whether something is going to work or not. You are entering into an uncharted territory. That's uncharted not just by you, but everybody in your environment. So you don't have experience doing this. So you are walking in the dark. Most people have taken the conventional path. They have had a job, they have had a career, but very few people take on this path, which is kind of like, dark. I mean, Dan Pena had been through it, so he shared his experience that illuminated the path. But it's still not fully illuminated until you walk on it. When you walk on it, that's when it really opens up. So it's still darkness in front of you when you're walking, and it can get very uncomfortable because you are investing time. You could invest into something where you're familiar with, but you're investing time in something you haven't done. And every step, there is uncertainty. Every single step. So you know what to do because you understand the model. I understood the model. I knew what was coming, but I didn't know how I would react to it, or how will I be able to do it or not. That's the lack of experience, is that I don't have a reference point whether what I'm saying, what I'm doing will work or not. So you're discovering, and that's also a little bit exciting, at least for me, to walk this path, to walk this tightrope and just knock on a door and see what comes out of it. There's an element of surprise there. I didn't know that this person is going to say yes. When he said yes, boom, that's a reference experience, and everything changes. And then you have another win, and suddenly you are standing on top of these wins, these experiences, and your confidence changes, your voice changes, everything about you changes as you're taking these steps. So that's Number third was hardest is you doing something you don't have experience in, you don't have a reference to look back and say whether this will work or not. You just aiming in the dark, and then it works out, and then you're like, holy shit, and you keep going and you stack up wins. Number four is, again, disruptions in the personal life. So if you have a job or a small business, or you're self-employed, you're paying your expenses, and you're doing this on the side, the first thing that's going to get compromised is your personal life. And that may include your spouse, your girlfriend, people in your environment that are associated with you. That aspect of your life is the one that would get suffered, that would suffer. And this is where disruptions start to happen. They may not happen in the first month. I had anticipated that maybe on the first month it would happen, but sometimes they happen on the 12th month, 14th month, 15th month, 16th month. So people in your life are pretty patient, but then they see that, this guy is not responding, this guy is not meeting us, what's going on? There'll start to be disruptions, and you would feel it in your body, like connections breaking, connections and relationships that you invested a lot of time in would suddenly break and get disrupted. And all of this affects your mind, affects your emotional state. So this is, again, a very challenging part of the curator model is the disruption, the personal disruptions in life that start to happen. And that can be very painful to deal with. Then you've got number 5 is dealing with people older than you. So I'm relatively young. So when I see somebody 50, 60 years old, there is a conditioning to give them authority, over you, or give them more power, essentially. And you're dealing with people who have had a very successful track record, and you're not only dealing with them, you're leading them. Your job as the founder, as the major shareholder, is to lead these people. So you are leading somebody who has got 30 years of experience more than you. And you're relying on their advice, which is the good part, but you're also leading them. And that can be very challenging, to deal with these people, because, how many of the 60-year-old have you led, right? And these high-profile executives, they have a whole experience to back up what they're saying. But how much experience do you have to back up when you're leading them? So how do you lead when you haven't had experience? That was a little bit of a challenge. I figured out the knack around it, that just because somebody has a 30-year experience doesn't mean they have seen everything in the world. They haven't. There are thousands of ways of doing one thing. It's one thing that they have done one way, there are thousands of ways to doing that one thing. And they may have experience doing it 50 different ways, but they may not have that experience doing the 51st or the 52nd method, right? So just because somebody has experienced 30 years doesn't mean they have experienced everything. There is a lot in the world, even in the corporate world. It's a huge world, it's a huge corporate world. It's a huge space. The world of business is very big and very huge. So just because somebody has experience doesn't mean they have experience in everything, and doesn't mean they can predict the future. So just because somebody has experience doesn't mean they're always right. That's not the case. Even Warren Buffett is wrong at times. So just because somebody's experienced doesn't mean they're always right. And just because you knew doesn't mean that you don't have that fresh perspective. And a lot of the times, that's what you bring to the table, fresh perspective. You don't have a lot of bad reference experiences, and you have the ability to just jump and try things in a new way, right? Just like a child would. So that's a very different added value. I know sometimes it can be undervalued. This ability to see things in a fresh perspective can be undervalued by a lot of people. They don't think it's much valuable, but it is extremely valuable. And some of my board members, they've given me the feedback that we have learned things from you. And that was a huge compliment, that I have learned things from you. How you do things is completely new, completely fresh. We haven't seen anybody do things like this. It's a completely fresh perspective. So that's always something that you add to the table. And that's another, the challenge is dealing with people older than you can be a challenge. Another one is big numbers. I mean, companies are ecosystems that you're buying. So this is not like buying a car or a house. This is an entire ecosystem. This company has employees. It has got thousands of customers. It's got, streamlined processes and systems. And all of this is generating millions of dollars in revenues. So I hadn't found anything that was that expensive. I mean, the most expensive thing I would have found was maybe a car or a house until that point. But businesses are far bigger than houses and far bigger than cars, right? Businesses can be worth any amount of money. I mean, like I found $1 million business, then I found $3.5 million business. I found a $10 million business. Then I found a $25 million business. And then I found a $120 million business and a $140 million business. And these two businesses, $120 and $140 million businesses, belong to a very large public company that was worth $10 billion. And I was like, this is obscene. The numbers that I thought were impossible and beyond reach, somebody has just done it. Somebody has just built this thing. My whole environment was telling me that this is obscene or this is unreasonable number, this, that, whenever I would share my goals. And here in front of me, I have a financial statement of an actual company that has produced the revenue. That is my dream goal. And that company is a part of a larger company that is so big that even in my wildest dreams, I would hesitate and even be ashamed to admit that that's how much money I would want to make in my whole life. This guy has done it. And you were talking to this company. So that can be a very overwhelming experience, to say the least. And once again, by that time, I had broken a lot of limiting beliefs. I wasn't as scared in that meeting, to my surprise. I thought I would be freaking out, but it was just people, having a conversation, and it was just numbers. I kept saying this to myself, this is just people and it's just numbers. So this is, again, the thing that you would deal with is the numbers are too big to a point where it's a little bit obscene, to be honest. Even when I found a $10 million deal, I was, I shared it with my brother, and he was like, really? And I was like, really? I mean, because you would expect, because you don't see the company initially, you don't see the facility, you just see a financial statement, right? So it's just on paper at the beginning. So you're like, fuck, this is a $10 million business. This is insane. We used to think $10 million is a big deal, and this is considered a small company. And this is crazy. And then when I was going to get financing for it, we didn't end up doing that deal, but I was looking for financing, and two of the banks, they agreed that, they provided us with a term sheet saying that they could finance 50 to 70% of the transaction. So while I was in that presentation with the bank, I mean, just asking for $10 million from a bank was an overwhelming experience. I hadn't asked that kind of money in my whole life. I think before that, what the maximum I would have asked would be like between $2,000 to $5,000. That's what I had asked in my life at that time, a couple of years ago. So suddenly, from $2,000 to $5,000, I'm asking for a $10 million facility to buy this company as a 26, 27-year-old guy in this nice fine dine restaurant, sitting next to my CFO, who was a CFO of a $400 million company. He was a finance director. I mean, it can get a bit surreal that, holy shit, I mean, this is real. And then you think like, why wouldn't it be real? Of course, there are $10 million companies, especially in healthcare. Of course, those companies exist. Just because I didn't knock on those doors doesn't mean they don't exist. Now I did knock on the door and they existed, and they were interested to talk to me, and they were interested in sharing their financial information and having a dialogue. So just that discovery was a little bit obscene, and you may find it when you share this with people in your environment, which I recommend not doing, but if you do, they will think that you're lying. I mean, but if you think about it, there are companies which are worth that much. And what's the big deal if you just knocked on the door and asked for their financials? You know, setting up the proper premise and then asking for the financials. I mean, you're like, why didn't I do this before, right? But the numbers are big, and that can get a little bit challenging to wrap your head around. Everything in your system would get triggered. I promise you. Then you've got number 7 is paying expenses. So you were juggling, you were doing one thing, your job, your business, you were self-employed, paying your expenses, and now you have this added thing that you're doing alongside, and you have to juggle these two. So you have a range of tasks, and again, as I mentioned, personal life suffers. You could manage both these, but when the personal life suffers, you get drained, and it can get a little bit challenging. Some people manage it really well. I struggle personally because, again, I didn't have a job. I was building 2 businesses at the same time, which is something I don't recommend. You need to have one non-risky, stable source of income coming in, and you need this model, and then you can execute and you would be fine. But I was building 2 companies from scratch, and that was a bit challenging for me. So again, these are my hardest thing, what I found. Number 8 is a very classic one to coming from Asia, is the fear of debt, right? And the fear of taking debt or taking on debt comes from a lack of education, because there are many forms of debt. There are many kinds of debt. And this is something that over time, I started to get a little bit comfortable with. The debt is that I saw my mother raising money for education, to educate my brother. And that's a bad debt, because my brother doesn't have a job. There is no guarantee of job, and she's taking a loan to get educated in something where he may or may not get a job. And she has to work to generate the income to pay off that loan. And it's a personal loan. It's not a business loan. And there is a difference between the two. So I understood that this debt that I was exposed to, or when you put some gold or you buy a car, anything that you buy that's not cash flow producing, and it doesn't go up in value, that's bad debt. So for example, a car, if you're buying it for personal use, that doesn't produce any cash flow. Well, the debt is only going to be paid with cash flow. That money has to come from someplace. So the thing that you're buying doesn't produce cash flow. It makes you look good in the society, but it doesn't produce cash flow. And it goes down in value over time. And on top of it, you have to actively use your muscles, your hands and legs, your life, your time to generate the income to pay off that loan. So of course, people have developed a bad relationship to debt. And if you don't pay and you go into personal bankruptcy, everything is finished. But a company loan, when you are not the borrower, the company you are acquiring is the borrower. And this was another thing that was hard for me to wrap my head around. Is one of my lawyers, he explained this to me. Prithvi, you and the company are separate entities. The state, the country, the law does not recognize you and company as the same. You are separate and company is separate. And when you are raising money, you're raising at the company level. And the company you're buying, the debt is going to be on this company. It's not going to be in your name. Your name is going to be associated with the company, yes, but the debt, you're not the borrower. The company you're buying is the borrower. And that was a concept that I was like, holy shit. And this is an asset that most likely, if everything goes well, is going to go up in value because you're buying the right asset that's cash flowing, that's already profiting. And you're buying something that has been profitable since last 10, 15, 20 years. It was profitable during COVID times, and you're not buying 100% of the company, you're buying some portion of the company, and the owner is going to stay on for some time and he's going to explain how things work. And so, so when you're buying a company, you're buying cash flows, you're buying a cash machine. And the important thing is the ratio. You cannot just look at one aspect of the deal, which is the debt. You also have to look at the cash flow in the company. And if your debt looks like this and your cash flow looks like this, that's a deal. This is what a deal looks like. This is the debt and this is the cash flow. And if it doesn't look like this, then you messed up. The bank anyway is not going to give you the money, because the bank is going to give you this debt when it sees the company can easily pay the loan back. And the company is run by many people and is financed by many customers. When they purchase things from the company, it has a big customer base and it's got many employees. The company the cash flows do not just depend on your effort or your time. In fact, the company that you may want to acquire is already running. It's currently running. You are sitting wherever you're sitting in your home, maybe. That company that you may acquire is already running without you. So it's already producing that cash flow, and it has been producing that cash flow over the last 10 years. So you have an existing cash flow. Now there are risks involved. When you buy a company, you have to assess it. You have to look at the financials. You have to get the board's approval. You have to, have experts in place, advisors in place. You have to do proper due diligence. You have to structure the deal in the right way, value it the right way. You cannot pay all the purchase price up front. You pay some now and then you pay some in installments. All of those things considered. If you structure it properly, then you will see that debt would look like this and the cash flow would look like this, right? And you will look at the stability of the cash flows also. You would analyze it over the last many, many years. You would get help from a 30-year financial advisor who has 30 years of experience, lawyers who have 30 years of experience, operational guys who have worked in such companies. They know what goes wrong, what doesn't. You've got M&A experts who structured deals, and you have all of these expertise, and you have the owner of the business. So you have set a lot of the deck in your favor. Still, you will have risks, but you have to understand you're stacking a lot of debt, a lot of the deck in your favor. So that's another thing that could be hard to understand or hard to wrap your head around. And this is something that was hard to wrap my head around, was the debt. But debt creates risk, but you have to manage the risks. You have to structure things properly. You have to make sure the cash flow comes in, and you have to manage this process with your board, and you have to buy the right company. Some people ask me the question, what if, basically they ask me, what if they acquire a bad company and then how do they turn it around? And my answer is, don't acquire a bad company. How do you know a bad company from good? You have your board. That's why you build a board first, right? So you have to acquire a good company which is cash flowing, which is profitable. That starts with choosing the right industry. You have to get into healthcare, which is profitable, big margins. And it starts with the industry. And then you have to build the board. You have to identify the right niche in that industry. Go after something that's a sure shot, slam dunk deal. Then, businesses that are going to be there, for a long, long time, has been there for a long time. Something like a dental clinic or, a general clinic, home care companies. These are the slam dunk where a lot of success has been created. People need these services no matter what. Healthcare is one of the essential services. So you pick the industry in the right manner, you structure the deal right way, you have the right experts and advisors, and then you have to make sure the debt is little and it's backed by a lot of cash flows so that it just seems like another expense for you. You structure it in a legally in the right manner. Debt should not be in your name, it should be the name of the company. I made a whole series on that. Again, you need financial legal advisors to do this, but this is just an explanation, an overview, just to have for you to have a perspective as to the hard parts. So debt, the fear of debt was another thing that was hard for me to get my wrap my head around, and now I feel a lot more comfortable with it because I understand how things work thanks to my advisors and my mentors. So those are the top 8 things that I found the hardest in the QLA model. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you soon.